The morning sun cast golden rays through the tall windows of St. Catherine's Cathedral in downtown Charleston, South Carolina, creating patterns of light that danced across the white marble floors. As I adjusted my navy blue tie for the third time, I couldn't help but smile at the controlled chaos surrounding me. Today was my son Marcus's wedding day, and after 2 years of planning, everything was finally coming together. My name is Robert Chen, and at 54, I thought I'd seen enough of life to handle any situation with calm professionalism. 26 years as a federal prosecutor had taught me to read people, to spot deception, and to trust my instincts when something felt wrong. But nothing in my career had prepared me for the mixture of pride and anxiety that comes with watching your only child get married. Marcus stood in front of the full-length mirror in the groom's preparation room, his hands steady as he fastened his cufflinks, the same silver ones my father had worn at his wedding 60 years ago. At 28, my son had grown into the kind of man any father would be proud of, intelligent, compassionate, and driven by a sense of justice that had led him to follow in my footsteps as an attorney, though he'd chosen civil rights law over prosecution. "Dad, stop pacing," Marcus said with a gentle laugh, catching my reflection in the mirror. "You're making me nervous, and I'm supposed to be the one with wedding jitters." I forced myself to stand still, realizing I'd been unconsciously walking circles around the small room. "Sorry, son. I guess I'm more nervous than you are." "Why?" he asked, turning to face me with a genuine smile. "Everything's perfect. The weather's beautiful. The flowers arrived on time. Mom managed to coordinate with Elena's family without any major diplomatic incidents. And in about 3 hours, I'm going to marry the most amazing woman in the world." He was right about Elena. In the 2 years since Marcus had brought her home for Thanksgiving, she'd become the daughter my wife Linda and I had never had. Elena Rodriguez was brilliant, a pediatric surgeon at Charleston Medical Center, but more importantly, she made Marcus happy in ways I'd never seen before. She challenged him intellectually, supported his career ambitions, and somehow managed to make him laugh, even during his most stressful cases. The Rodriguez family had welcomed Marcus with the same warmth Elena had shown us. Her father, Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, was a respected cardiologist who'd emigrated from Colombia 30 years ago and built a successful practice through sheer determination and skill. Her mother, Carmen, was a former teacher who now ran a non-profit organization supporting immigrant families. The cathedral was filling up rapidly as the 11 o'clock ceremony approached. Through the window of the preparation room, I could see guests arriving in their finest attire, a mixture of our Chinese-American family, the Rodriguez family's Colombian relatives, and friends from law school, medical school, and our respective careers. Marcus had asked me to be his best man, an honor that had moved me to tears when he'd made the request 6 months ago. "Dad," he'd said over dinner at our favorite restaurant, "you've been my role model, my mentor, and my friend my entire life. I can't imagine anyone else standing beside me when I make the most important commitment of my life." We spent the next hour moving through the pre-ceremony activities with smooth efficiency. Pictures with the groomsmen, pictures with both sets of parents, pictures with extended family members who'd traveled from across the country to be here. Marcus remained calm and cheerful throughout, greeting relatives he hadn't seen in years and making conversation with Elena's family in his carefully practiced Spanish. By 10:30, most of the guests had arrived and taken their seats in the cathedral. I could see Linda near the front, resplendent in her emerald green dress, speaking quietly with Carmen Rodriguez about last-minute details. Both mothers had worked tirelessly to ensure this day would be perfect. 5 minutes until we start, announced Patricia, the wedding coordinator, an efficient woman in her 50s who had guided dozens of couples through their special days. Gentlemen, please take your positions at the altar. As we walked toward the main sanctuary, I felt my phone vibrate against my chest. The timing seemed odd. Most people knew to keep their phones silent during wedding ceremonies, and anyone important enough to contact me during Marcus's wedding would have been here in person. I decided to ignore it, assuming it was probably a work-related message that could wait until after the reception. The cathedral looked magnificent. Hundreds of white roses and baby's breath adorned the altar, their fragrance mixing with the scent of candles that flickered in the afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows. The guests rose as the processional music began, and I took my place beside Marcus at the altar. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle with graceful precision. Elena's sister Sophia, 2 college friends, and Marcus's colleague from law school. Then the music changed to Pachelbel's canon, and every person in the cathedral stood as Elena appeared at the back of the aisle with her father. Even from a distance, I could see that she was glowing with happiness, her smile radiant as she looked toward Marcus. Dr. Rodriguez walked with obvious pride, his military bearing evident even in his emotional state. Elena wore her grandmother's ivory silk wedding dress, a stunning creation of delicate lace that had been carefully preserved for this moment. As they made their way down the aisle, I glanced at Marcus and saw tears forming in his eyes. He'd always been emotional, even as a child, and I knew he was overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. Father Mitchell, who had baptized Marcus 28 years ago, spoke about the sacred nature of marriage and the importance of commitment, faith, and love. Marcus and Elena had written their own vows, and as they spoke to each other about their hopes for the future and their promises to support each other's dreams, there wasn't a dry eye in the congregation. Do you, Marcus Chen, take Elena Rodriguez to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part? I do, Marcus said, his voice clear and strong. Do you, Elena Rodriguez, take Marcus Chen to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part? I do, Elena replied, her voice equally firm despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. By the power vested in me, by the state of South Carolina, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, you may kiss your bride. So the cathedral erupted in applause as Marcus and Elena shared their first kiss as a married couple. I felt my own emotions threatening to overwhelm me as I watched my son embrace his new wife, both of them laughing and crying simultaneously. As the recessional music began and the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, my phone vibrated again. This time the vibration seemed more insistent, almost urgent. I glanced down discreetly and saw that I had 3 missed calls and 2 text messages, all from an unknown number. We gathered in the vestibule of the cathedral for more pictures and congratulations from the guests. Marcus and Elena were surrounded by well-wishers, both families mingling happily as they shared in the joy of the moment. I managed to step slightly away from the crowd and glance at my phone. 3 missed calls from 843-555-0147. 2 text messages from the same number. Important information about the wedding. Call me back immediately. This is urgent. Lives may be in danger. My blood ran cold. In 26 years as a federal prosecutor, I'd received my share of threats, both explicit and veiled. Most were from defendants or their families who blamed me for convictions or sentences they considered unfair. But threats that mentioned specific events, especially family events, were taken very seriously. I moved further away from the crowd and quickly dialed the number back. It went straight to voicemail. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. My hands started to shake slightly as I processed the implications. Someone had my personal cell phone number, knew about Marcus's wedding, and was making vague threats about danger. Then they'd immediately disconnected their phone, making it impossible to trace or respond to their messages. "Dad, you okay?" Marcus appeared at my elbow, his face glowing with happiness. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just checking work messages," I lied smoothly. "You know how it is." "Dad, it's my wedding day. Work can wait." "You're absolutely right," I said, forcing a smile and putting my arm around his shoulders. "I'm sorry, this is your day, and I should be focused on celebrating with you and Eleanor." But even as I spoke the words, my mind was racing through possibilities. Who would want to threaten Marcus's wedding? I'd been involved in hundreds of cases over my career, many involving dangerous criminals who might hold grudges, but most of those cases were years old, and threatening a wedding seemed like an unusual escalation. The photographer was organizing the wedding party for more formal pictures when my phone vibrated again. This time, I immediately looked at the screen. "Step outside now. Come alone. You have 60 seconds or everyone inside will regret it." Nah. The message was from a different number, 843-555-0284, but the area code indicated it was still local to Charleston. My prosecutor training kicked into high gear as I analyzed the threat. The specificity of the time limit suggested the sender was nearby, possibly watching the cathedral. The reference to everyone inside implied some kind of threat to the wedding guests. I had two choices: ignore the message and hope it was a prank, or take it seriously and potentially discover a real threat to my family's safety. Given the context, my career, the high-profile nature of some of my cases, and the specific targeting of a family event, I couldn't afford to assume it was harmless. "Marcus," I said quietly, pulling him aside, "I need to step outside for a moment. Keep everyone here until I get back, okay?" "Dad, what's wrong? You look worried." "Probably nothing. Just a work issue that needs immediate attention. I'll be right back." I could see the concern in his eyes, but before he could ask more questions, I was already moving toward the cathedral's main entrance. As I walked, I quickly sent a text to Linda. "Stay with Marcus and Elena. Don't let anyone leave until I return." The heavy wooden doors of St. Catherine's Cathedral opened onto Broad Street, one of Charleston's most historic and well-traveled roads. The afternoon sun was warm on my face as I stepped outside, but I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. I looked left and right, studying every person, every vehicle, every potential hiding place within view of the cathedral. Charleston's historic district was busy with typical Saturday afternoon activity. Tourists taking pictures of the antebellum architecture, locals walking their dogs, street musicians playing for tips near the market. Everything looked normal, which somehow made it feel more ominous. My phone vibrated again, another text from the second number. "Look across the street, black sedan. License plate TXB 4891. Your son's new wife has a secret that could destroy both their careers. Check the trunk." I followed the directions and spotted the black sedan immediately. It was a newer model Lincoln, tinted windows, parked legally at a meter about 50 yards from the cathedral entrance. From where I stood, I couldn't see the license plate clearly, but the car matched the description exactly. Every instinct I'd developed as a prosecutor was screaming that this was a trap. Anonymous messages, mysterious cars, threats involving family members. It all felt like the setup for an ambush, but the specific mention of Elena and the reference to career-destroying secrets added a layer of complexity that made me hesitate. What if this wasn't about my cases at all? What if this was about Elena? I realized that despite 2 years of knowing her, I actually knew very little about Elena's life before she came to Charleston for her medical residency. I walked closer to the sedan, trying to get a better look at the license plate. As I got within about 20 feet, I could confirm that the plate did indeed read TXB 4891. The car appeared to be empty, but the tinted windows made it impossible to be certain. My phone vibrated once more. Trunk is unlocked. Inside you'll find documents that prove Elena Rodriguez is not who she claims to be. Your son is about to marry someone with a criminal past that could destroy his legal career. Look now, or lose the chance forever. I stood on the sidewalk, wrestling with a decision that felt impossible. If I opened that trunk and found nothing, I could return to the cathedral and put this bizarre incident behind us. But if I found something that confirmed these mysterious messages, everything would change. I walked to the sedan, my heart pounding. The trunk handle was indeed unlocked. I placed my hand on the cool metal, took a deep breath, and lifted the trunk lid. Inside was a manila envelope, thick with documents, lying in the center of the otherwise empty trunk. Written on the front in block letters, Robert Chen, read immediately, lives depend on it. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and began to read the first document inside. As my eyes scanned the pages, my blood ran cold, and I realized that everything I thought I knew about Elena Rodriguez was about to change forever. The first document I pulled from the envelope was a police report from Miami-Dade County, dated 3 years ago. The header read, "Incident Report, Suspicious Death Investigation," and below it, in stark black and white, was a name that made my hands tremble: Dr. Elena Maria Rodriguez. According to the report, Elena had been questioned in connection with the death of her former fiancé, Dr. James Patterson, a fellow surgeon who had died under suspicious circumstances in their shared apartment. The initial cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest, but subsequent investigation had revealed traces of digitalis in his system, a heart medication that, in the wrong doses, could be lethal. I forced myself to keep reading, even as my mind reeled from the implications. The report indicated that Elena had access to digitalis through her work at Miami General Hospital, where she'd been completing her pediatric surgery fellowship. She'd also been the sole beneficiary of James Patterson's life insurance policy, worth $750,000, and had been scheduled to inherit his stake in a successful medical practice. The investigation had ultimately been closed without charges due to insufficient evidence. But reading between the lines, I could see that the detectives had serious suspicions about Elena's involvement. There were statements from colleagues who described tension in Elena and James's relationship, financial pressure related to Elena's student loans, and concern from James's family about Elena's behavior in the weeks leading up to his death. My prosecutor's mind immediately began analyzing the evidence, and I didn't like what I was seeing. Means, motive, and opportunity, the 3 pillars of any criminal case, were all present. The second document was even more disturbing. A coroner's report from Bogota, Colombia, dated 7 years ago. The deceased was listed as Dr. Carlos Mendez, Elena's supervisor during her medical internship. The cause of death was acute respiratory failure following what appeared to be an allergic reaction to shellfish, but the additional notes in the file told a different story. Dr. Mendez had no known allergies and had eaten shellfish regularly throughout his life. His family had requested a thorough investigation after Elena inherited his research data and publications, work that had subsequently launched her successful application to prestigious fellowship programs in the United States. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. 2 men, both in Elena's life, both dead under circumstances that benefited her career and financial situation. 2 investigations that had found suspicious evidence, but not enough to prosecute. The third document was a psychiatric evaluation, apparently conducted during Elena's medical school years in Colombia. The psychologist's notes described concerning behavior patterns, manipulation of authority figures, lack of genuine empathy despite an ability to mimic appropriate emotional responses, and what the evaluator termed instrumental relationships. Connections formed not out of genuine affection, but to achieve specific goals. The evaluation included a formal diagnosis that made my blood run cold: antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic traits. The psychologist's summary noted Eleanor's remarkable ability to present herself as caring and trustworthy while pursuing her own interests without regard for others' welfare. I had to sit down on the curb as the full implications hit me. If these documents were authentic, then Elena wasn't just hiding a troubled past. She was a predator who had identified Marcus as her next target. The fourth document was a financial analysis that traced Elena's monetary situation over the past 5 years. Despite the insurance payout from James Patterson's death, Elena was apparently deep in debt. Her medical school loans totaled over $300,000, and she'd been making only minimum payments, while spending money on maintaining an affluent lifestyle that her residence salary couldn't support. The analysis showed that Elena had been researching Marcus's background extensively before they'd accidentally met at a medical conference 2.5 years ago. She'd known about my career, our family's financial situation, and Marcus's inheritance prospects. Their entire relationship had been calculated from the beginning. The final document was the most chilling of all: a copy of a life insurance application Marcus had filled out 6 months ago, apparently at Elena's suggestion. The policy was for $2 million, with Eleanor listed as the primary beneficiary. According to the attached notes, Eleanor had been researching various substances that could cause cardiac events in healthy young men, substances that would be difficult to detect in routine autopsies. My phone vibrated again. Another message from the second number: "Now you know the truth. Elena Rodriguez has killed before, and she will kill again. Your son is in immediate danger. Walk to the parking garage across the street. Level 3, space 47. You have 10 minutes. Uday, I looked back at the cathedral, where I could see guests beginning to exit for the transition to the reception venue. Marcus and Elena would be expecting me to escort them to their limousine, but instead I was sitting on a sidewalk reading evidence that suggested my new daughter-in-law was a serial killer. I walked toward the parking garage across from the cathedral. Level 3 was dimly lit and mostly empty. Space 47 was in a corner, partially hidden from view. As I approached, I could see a white Toyota Camry with an older woman sitting in the driver's seat. She got out as I approached, probably in her early 60s, well-dressed, but with an expression of deep sadness and anxiety. "Mr. Chen?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight accent. "Yes. Who are you, and what is this about?" "My name is Maria Patterson. James Patterson was my son." The name hit me like a physical blow. James Patterson, Elena's former fiancé, the man who had died under suspicious circumstances in Miami 3 years ago. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm very sorry for your loss, but I don't understand what this has to do with—" "Your son is going to marry the woman who killed my James," she interrupted, tears streaming down her face, "and I couldn't let that happen without trying to warn you." She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick folder containing additional documents: photographs, financial records, witness statements, and medical reports that painted an even more disturbing picture of Elena's past. "James was so happy when he met her," Mrs. Patterson continued, her voice breaking. "He called me every week to tell me about this wonderful woman he'd found. He was planning to propose, talking about the children they would have." She showed me a photograph of a young man who looked remarkably similar to Marcus. Tall, dark-haired, with kind eyes and an open, trusting expression. Elena was very patient with James. She spent months gaining his trust, learning about his finances, meeting his friends and family. She even convinced him to increase his life insurance policy, just like she did with your son. My stomach lurched as I realized the parallels. Elena had indeed suggested Marcus increase his life insurance, framing it as responsible financial planning for their future family. The night James died, Mrs. Patterson continued, Elena called me crying, saying she'd found him collapsed in their bathroom. She performed CPR, called 911, rode with him to the hospital. She played the role of the grieving fiancé perfectly. She pulled out another document, the original autopsy report that had initially ruled James's death as natural causes. It wasn't until James's brother insisted on additional testing that they found the digitalis. By then, Eleanor had already collected the insurance money and moved to Charleston to start her new life. Mrs. Patterson reached into her purse again and pulled out a small recording device. This is the most important thing I have to show you, Mr. Chen. Last month, I hired a private investigator to approach Elena at a medical conference in Atlanta. He posed as a pharmaceutical researcher. She pressed play, and I heard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Male voice. Dr. Rodriguez, I understand you've done research on cardiac medications and their effects on healthy individuals. Elena's voice. Yes. It's an area of particular interest to me. The cardiovascular system is so complex, and there are so many ways that seemingly harmless substances can cause unexpected reactions. Male voice. Have you observed any substances that could cause cardiac events without being easily detected in standard autopsy procedures? Eleanor's voice. Well, there are several possibilities. Digitalis, derivatives, certain potassium compounds, even some naturally occurring plant toxins. The key is understanding how much to use and how to introduce them into the subject's system without arousing suspicion. Male voice. That's fascinating. Do you have experience with these substances in clinical settings? Elena's voice. Pause. I prefer not to discuss specific cases, but I will say that medical knowledge can be versatile when applied creatively. She essentially confessed to murder, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She did. But she was careful not to admit to any specific crimes. My attorney says this recording alone wouldn't be enough to secure a conviction. Mrs. Patterson reached for my arm, her grip desperate and urgent. Mr. Chen, I know this is overwhelming, but I've been watching Elena for 3 years. I've seen her research potential victims, seen her move from city to city building new identities. Your son fits her pattern perfectly, and if you don't act now, he's going to end up like my James. I looked at my watch and realized that 40 minutes had passed since I'd first stepped outside the cathedral. Mrs. Patterson, assuming everything you've told me is true, what exactly are you suggesting I do? You have to get him away from her. Tonight, before they leave for their honeymoon. Elena's pattern is to kill her victims during romantic getaways, isolated locations where she can control the environment. I felt a chill as I realized that Marcus and Elena were indeed leaving tomorrow morning for a 2-week honeymoon in Costa Rica, a remote eco-lodge where medical facilities would be hours away. I have a plan, Mrs. Patterson continued. I've been working with a private investigator who has connections with the Charleston Police Department. If we can get Elena to incriminate herself, if we can record her admitting to planning harm to your son, then we can have her arrested. She pulled out another device, a small wireless microphone and recording system. This is professional-grade equipment. If you can wear this during the reception, if you can get Elena alone and ask the right questions, we might be able to get the evidence we need to save your son's life. I stared at the recording equipment, my mind racing through the implications. Mrs. Patterson, if I do this, if I agree to help you, how do I know you're telling me the truth? She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. Detective Raymond Torres, Miami-Dade Police Department, Homicide Division. Call him right now. Ask him about Elena Rodriguez and whether he believes she killed my son." I dialed the number immediately. Detective Torres answered on the second ring. "Detective Torres, this is Robert Chen. I'm a federal prosecutor in Charleston, South Carolina, and I need to ask you about a case involving Elena Rodriguez and the death of James Patterson." There was a pause. "Mr. Chen, can you tell me why you're asking about this case?" "She just married my son an hour ago, and I'm being presented with evidence that suggests she may have killed James Patterson. I need to know if you believe she's dangerous." Detective Torres was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was grim. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Elena Rodriguez is the most calculating and dangerous person I've encountered in 15 years of homicide investigation. I'm absolutely convinced she murdered James Patterson, but she was too smart to leave evidence that would hold up in court." My heart sank as the detective continued. "We found digitalis in James's system, but Elena had a plausible explanation for everything. She said James had been complaining of chest pains and had asked her to get him something from the hospital to help. She claimed she gave him what she thought was a mild cardiac medication, but that she must have made a mistake in the dosage. But you didn't believe her?" "Not for a second. Elena Rodriguez is a pediatric surgeon. She knows exactly how medications work and what doses are lethal. But proving intentional murder versus medical error is almost impossible when the suspect has legitimate medical knowledge." Detective Torres paused. "Mr. Chen, there's something else you should know. After we closed the Patterson case, I did some informal research into Elena's background. I found at least 3 other suspicious deaths connected to her over the past decade. In every case, she inherited money, property, or professional opportunities from the deceased. Detective, if my son is in danger, what can I do? Mr. Chen, I'm going to give you some advice that could save your son's life. Do not let him go on that honeymoon. Whatever you have to do, fake a family emergency, call in a bomb threat to the airport. Do not let Elena get him alone in a foreign country where she can control the circumstances of his death. But I can't just tell him his wife is a serial killer without proof. Then get proof. Elena is overconfident now that she's successfully married your son. She might be willing to reveal more than she should if she thinks she's speaking to someone who could be useful to her plans." I thanked Detective Torres and hung up, my mind reeling from the confirmation of Mrs. Patterson's claims. Mrs. Patterson was watching my face anxiously. "What did Detective Torres tell you?" "He confirmed everything you've said. He believes Elena killed your son, and he thinks Marcus is in immediate danger." I looked at the recording equipment. "Tell me exactly what you want me to do." "The device is simple to operate. You clip the microphone inside your jacket, and it will record everything Elena says within a 15-foot radius. The goal is to get Elena to discuss her plans for Marcus, ideally to get her to admit that she intends to harm him. How am I supposed to bring up a topic like that without arousing her suspicion? Elena is narcissistic and overconfident. If you approach her as someone who admires her intelligence, someone who might be useful to her in the future, she'll be more likely to reveal her true nature." I checked my watch again. The reception had started, and my absence would be becoming noticeable. "Mrs. Patterson, I need to get to that reception. If I'm going to do this, it has to happen tonight." She helped me attach the microphone and showed me how to activate the recording system. "Mr. Chen, I know this is the hardest thing anyone could ask of a father, but if you don't do this, your son will be dead within 6 months." As I walked back toward the cathedral where a limousine was waiting, I tried to process the surreal nature of my situation. 2 hours ago, I'd been the proud father of the groom. Now I was walking into his wedding reception wearing a wire, preparing to gather evidence that his new wife was a serial killer. The limousine ride to the Charleston Harbor Resort was torture. Marcus and Elena sat across from me, holding hands and laughing about moments from the ceremony. Elena looked radiant in her wedding dress, her face glowing with what appeared to be genuine happiness and love for my son. "Dad, where did you disappear to after the ceremony?" Marcus asked. "We were looking for you when it was time to leave." "Sorry about that," I said, forcing a smile. "I got a call from the office about an urgent case. You know how it is." Elena turned her attention to me, her eyes sparkling with interest. "Marcus tells me you're working on some fascinating cases, Mr. Chen. It must be exciting to have so much power over people's lives." There was something in the way she said "power over people's lives" that made my skin crawl. It sounded less like admiration for justice and more like appreciation for control. "It's a responsibility I take very seriously," I replied carefully. "The decisions we make in the prosecutor's office can have profound consequences for families." "Yes," Elena said, her smile becoming slightly predatory. "I imagine you understand better than most people how fragile life can be, how quickly circumstances can change." Marcus squeezed her hand affectionately. "Elena's always been fascinated by your work, Dad. She asks me about your cases all the time. I filed that information away as potentially significant. Why would a pediatric surgeon be particularly interested in the details of federal prosecution cases?" The Charleston Harbor Resort was spectacular, decorated with thousands of white lights and flowers that transformed the ballroom into something magical. As we entered, the 300 guests erupted in applause for the bride and groom. I watched Eleanor carefully throughout the cocktail hour, noting how she interacted with different groups of people. With Marcus's friends from law school, she was the brilliant medical professional who could discuss complex legal issues. With her medical colleagues, she was the devoted wife who'd found perfect balance between career and family. With elderly relatives, she was the respectful daughter-in-law who honored family traditions. But I also noticed moments when she thought no one was watching, brief expressions that didn't match her words, calculating looks when people discussed money or inheritance, and a tendency to steer conversations toward topics that might reveal useful information about others' vulnerabilities. During dinner, I found myself seated at the head table between Linda and Elena's mother, Carmen Rodriguez. As the meal progressed, I realized this might be an opportunity to learn more about Elena's background. "Carmen," I said during a lull in conversation, "Elena mentioned that she went through some difficult times before coming to Charleston. It must have been hard for her, losing her fiancé so tragically." Carmen's expression immediately became guarded. "Yes, that was a very sad time for Eleanor, but she's always been strong, always able to move forward from tragedy. It's remarkable how resilient she's been," I continued carefully. Marcus mentioned that she'd also lost some important mentors during her medical training. Carmen's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Mr. Chen, I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, I just thought Marcus had mentioned that some of her professors or supervisors had passed away unexpectedly." Carmen set down her fork and looked directly at me. "Mr. Chen, Elena doesn't talk much about her time in medical school or her early career. She says it's better to focus on the future than dwell on the past." There was something in Carmen's tone that suggested she might have her own concerns about Elena's history. Of course, that's very wise. Although I imagine as her mother, you must worry sometimes about the tragedies that seem to follow her. Carmen's eyes widened slightly, and she glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. "Mr. Chen, what exactly are you trying to say?" "I'm not trying to say anything specific. I just find it interesting how often Elena has been present when people in her life have died unexpectedly." Carmen stood up abruptly. "Excuse me, Mr. Chen. I need to use the restroom." As she walked away, I realized I might have pushed too hard too quickly. But Carmen's reaction suggested that she might have her own suspicions about Elena's past. The evening progressed with the traditional wedding activities, toasts, cake cutting, and the first dance. I gave my father of the groom speech, somehow managing to sound proud and happy while my mind raced with thoughts of the evidence hidden in my jacket pocket. As Marcus and Elena danced to their chosen song, At Last, by Etta James, I watched their faces and tried to reconcile what I was seeing with what I'd learned about Elena's past. Marcus looked completely content, utterly trusting, deeply in love. Elena appeared equally devoted, but now that I knew what to look for, I could see something calculated in her expressions. Around 10 o'clock, as the reception moved into its final phase, I realized I needed to create an opportunity to speak with Elena alone. The recording equipment Mrs. Patterson had given me was still waiting to be activated. I approached Elena during a quiet moment when Marcus was talking with his groomsmen near the bar. "Elena, could I speak with you privately for a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss about the honeymoon." She smiled brightly. "Of course, Mr. Chen. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine. I just wanted to give you something for the trip." I led her out onto the resort's terrace, which overlooked Charleston Harbor. The moonlight reflected off the water, creating a romantic backdrop that felt obscene given the conversation I was about to attempt. "Elena," I began, activating the recording device as discreetly as possible, "I wanted to tell you how grateful Linda and I are that Marcus found someone as remarkable as you. Thank you, Mr. Chen. That means everything to me. I also wanted you to know that if you ever need anything at all, you can come to me. I understand that successful people sometimes face challenges that others wouldn't comprehend." Elena's expression became more attentive. "What kind of challenges?" "Well, for example, I know that your medical career has involved some difficult situations. Losing patients, dealing with unexpected complications, having to make quick decisions under pressure." "Yes, medicine can be very demanding." I decided to take a more direct approach. "Elena, I also know that you've experienced some personal tragedies that might have left you with financial pressures or professional obligations that are complicated." Elena was quiet for a moment, studying my face carefully. "Mr. Chen, I'm not sure I understand what you're suggesting." "I'm suggesting that if you've ever had to make difficult choices in order to protect your future or Marcus's future, I would understand. Sometimes people in positions of responsibility have to do things that others might not approve of." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you asking me if I've done something wrong?" This was the critical moment. I could back down, apologize for the misunderstanding, and return to the reception. Or I could push forward and try to get Elena to reveal her true nature. "I'm asking if you're the kind of person who does whatever is necessary to achieve your goals, regardless of what others might think." Elena was quiet for a long time, her gaze fixed on the harbor. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, colder, more calculating. "Mr. Chen, I think you and I understand each other better than I initially realized." "What do you mean?" "I mean that successful people, really successful people, sometimes have to make choices that weaker people couldn't handle, choices that require vision and determination, and a willingness to prioritize long-term benefits over short-term sentimentality." My heart was pounding as I realized that Elena was beginning to drop her mask. "Can you give me an example?" Elena smiled, but it wasn't the warm, loving smile I'd seen her give Marcus throughout the evening. This smile was predatory. "Mr. Chen, in my profession, I've learned that death is sometimes a solution rather than a problem." When someone is suffering, when they're preventing others from reaching their potential, when they're standing in the way of progress, sometimes the most compassionate thing to do is to help them transition peacefully. And you've had to make those kinds of decisions several times, and I've learned that people rarely question the death of someone who was already vulnerable, someone whose loss can be attributed to natural causes or unfortunate accidents. I felt sick as I realized that Elena was essentially confessing to murder, but in language so carefully chosen that it could be interpreted as discussing medical ethics rather than criminal activity. Elena, what about Marcus? Do you ever worry that he might become vulnerable? Elena turned to look directly at me, and for the first time I saw her without any pretense. Her eyes were cold, calculating, utterly without empathy. Mr. Chen, Marcus is a wonderful man, but he's also trusting to a fault. He believes in people, he assumes the best about their motivations, and he's never learned to protect himself from those who might take advantage of his generous nature. Are you planning to take advantage of his generous nature? Elena's smile widened. Mr. Chen, I'm planning to build a beautiful life with your son. And if that life requires certain adjustments to ensure our mutual prosperity and happiness, then I'm prepared to make whatever decisions are necessary. I realized that Elena was essentially telling me she intended to kill Marcus, but she was doing it in language so veiled that she could claim later that I'd misunderstood her meaning. Elena, when you say adjustments, what exactly do you mean? Before she could answer, Marcus appeared on the terrace, his face glowing with happiness. There you two are. I was wondering where you disappeared to. Elena immediately transformed back into the loving bride, moving to Marcus's side and linking her arm through his. Your father was just giving me some wonderful advice about marriage, she said sweetly. He's such a wise man. Marcus beamed. He is. Dad, thank you for everything you've done to make this day perfect. As I watched Elena smile at my son, knowing what I now knew about her true nature, I realized that Mrs. Patterson had been right. Elena Rodriguez was a predator who had successfully identified Marcus as her next victim, and she was already planning his death. The question now was whether the recording I'd just made would be enough to save my son's life. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of forced smiles and mounting dread. I managed to maintain the appearance of a celebrating father while my mind raced through the implications of Eleanor's veiled confession. Every time I looked at Marcus, laughing with his friends, dancing with his new wife, glowing with happiness, I felt sick knowing that the woman he'd just pledged his life to was planning his death. By midnight, the reception was winding down. Marcus and Elena were scheduled to spend their wedding night at the resort's honeymoon suite before flying to Costa Rica the following afternoon. As the guests began to leave, I realized I had very little time to act on the information I'd gathered. I slipped away from the farewell festivities and called Mrs. Patterson from the resort's business center. "Did you get the recording?" I asked without preamble. "Every word," she replied grimly. Elena essentially admitted to committing murder and implied that she's planning to kill Marcus. But Mr. Chen, we have a problem. What kind of problem? I've been monitoring police scanners tonight, and there's been some unusual activity. It appears that Elena may have suspected something about our investigation. 2 hours ago, someone matching her description was seen at Charleston International Airport checking on flight schedules to Colombia. My blood ran cold. You think she's planning to run? I think she's planning to accelerate her timeline. If Elena believes she's been exposed, she might try to kill Marcus tonight and disappear before anyone can stop her. I felt panic rising in my chest. What can we do? Even with the recording, we don't have enough evidence to have her arrested. Detective Torres is flying in from Miami tonight. He's bringing case files that might be enough to at least detain Elena for questioning. But he won't arrive until 6 a.m. and the newlyweds' flight to Costa Rica leaves at 2 p.m. Mrs. Patterson paused, and I could hear the urgency in her voice when she continued. Mr. Chen, you have to keep Elena away from Marcus until Detective Torres arrives. Whatever it takes, fake a medical emergency, call in a bomb threat, have Marcus arrested for public intoxication. Do not let her get him alone. I checked my watch. It was 12:30 a.m. If I could keep Marcus and Elena separated for just 5.5 hours, Detective Torres might be able to provide the evidence needed to stop Elena permanently. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to need your help. Can you create some kind of distraction that would require Elena's immediate attention? Something medical that would separate her from Marcus? I've already thought of that. I'm going to fake a heart attack in the hotel lobby. Elena's medical training will compel her to respond, and it will give you an opportunity to get Marcus away from her. I returned to the ballroom, where Marcus and Elena were saying their final goodbyes to the remaining guests. Linda was helping to coordinate the departure logistics, ensuring that the bride and groom's luggage was transferred to their suite. Marcus, I said, approaching the couple, before you two retire for the evening, I wanted to discuss some legal documents that need your signature. Eleanor looked at me with sharp interest. What kind of legal documents? Nothing urgent, I said, trying to sound casual. Just some trust paperwork that Linda and I have been updating. It would only take a few minutes, but it needs to be done before you leave the country. Marcus nodded agreeably. Sure, Dad. Should we do it now, or would tomorrow morning be better? Now would be preferable if Elena doesn't mind. We could handle it in the business center while Elena gets settled in the suite. I watched Elena's face carefully as she processed this suggestion. I could see her calculating the implications. Would this legal meeting provide her with useful information about Marcus's financial situation? Actually, Eleanor said smoothly, I'd prefer to be present for any legal discussions involving Marcus. As his wife, I think I should be aware of any changes to his financial arrangements. Before I could respond, commotion erupted in the hotel lobby. Through the ballroom's glass doors, I could see Mrs. Patterson collapsed on the marble floor, clutching her chest and calling for help. Several hotel guests were gathering around her, and someone was shouting for a doctor. Elena's medical instincts kicked in immediately. Someone's having a cardiac event, she said, already moving toward the lobby. I need to help. Elena, wait, Marcus called after her. It's your wedding night. Let the hotel staff handle it. But Elena was already running toward the emergency, her wedding dress flowing behind her as she rushed to provide medical assistance. I could see her kneeling beside Mrs. Patterson, checking her pulse and asking for someone to call 911. This was my chance. I grabbed Marcus's arm and steered him toward the elevators. Dad, shouldn't we wait for Elena? She might need help with whoever's having the heart attack. She's got it handled, son. Besides, this legal matter really can't wait until tomorrow. I practically pushed Marcus into the elevator, my heart pounding as I realized I was essentially kidnapping my own son to protect him from his wife. As the elevator doors closed, I could see Eleanor through the lobby's glass doors, still attending to Mrs. Patterson, but looking around anxiously for Marcus. Dad, what's so urgent about these legal documents that it can't wait 12 hours? I had prepared for this question. Marcus, there are some tax implications related to your marriage that need to be addressed before you leave the country. If we don't file the proper paperwork before your honeymoon, it could cost you thousands of dollars in penalties. It was a believable lie, and Marcus accepted it without question. I led him to the business center and began pulling out random documents from my briefcase, trying to buy time while Mrs. Patterson kept Elena occupied downstairs. Dad, these look like your case files, not tax documents. I was running out of plausible explanations when my phone rang. It was Eleanor. Mr. Chen, Where are you and Marcus? I've been looking for you everywhere. We're in the business center handling some paperwork. How's the person who had the heart attack? She's stable. The paramedics are taking her to the hospital as a precaution. But Mr. Chen, I'd like to join you and Marcus for this legal discussion. Actually, Eleanor, we're just finishing up. Why don't you go ahead to your suite? Marcus will be up shortly. There was a pause before Eleanor responded, and when she spoke again, her voice was colder. Mr. Chen, I really think I should be present for any legal matters involving my husband. The way she emphasized my husband sent chills down my spine. Eleanor was asserting her claim to Marcus, and she wasn't going to be easily separated from him. Of course, I said. We'll be right down. I hung up and turned to Marcus, who was looking confused and increasingly impatient. Dad, what's really going on here? You're acting strange. These aren't tax documents, and I want to get back to my wife. This was the moment I'd been dreading. I had to decide whether to tell Marcus the truth about Elena and risk him not believing me, or continue the charade and hope that Detective Torres would arrive in time. I chose honesty. Marcus, I need you to listen to me very carefully. There are some serious concerns about Elena's background that have come to my attention. I can't give you all the details right now, but I need you to trust me and stay away from her until tomorrow morning. Marcus stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. Dad, what are you talking about? Concerns about Elena's background. She's my wife. I've known her for 2 years. Son, sometimes people aren't who they appear to be. Sometimes people have secrets that could be dangerous. Marcus stood up abruptly, anger flashing in his eyes. Dad, I can't believe you're doing this. It's my wedding night and you're trying to turn me against Elena with some ridiculous conspiracy theory. Marcus, please, just give me until tomorrow morning. Don't go to your suite tonight. Stay here with me or go to our house or check into a different room. Just don't be alone with Elena. You're insane, Marcus said, heading for the door. I don't know what's gotten into you, but I'm not going to let you ruin the happiest day of my life with paranoid delusions about my wife. I tried to block his path, but Marcus pushed past me and stormed out of the business center. I followed him, trying to reason with him, but he was already at the elevators. Marcus, wait! Let me explain! There's nothing to explain, Dad. You're having some kind of breakdown, and I'm not going to enable it. I'm going to my wife, and I don't want to see you until you're ready to apologize for this insanity. The elevator doors closed between us, and I watched the numbers climb toward the 20th floor where the honeymoon suite was located. I had failed to keep Marcus away from Eleanor, and now he was angry enough that he probably wouldn't listen to anything else I tried to tell him. I rushed to the lobby, looking for Mrs. Patterson, but she was already gone, presumably taken to the hospital by the paramedics she'd summoned for her fake heart attack. I tried calling her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. With no other options, I took the next elevator to the 20th floor. I had to at least try to protect my son, even if it meant confronting Elena directly. The honeymoon suite was at the end of a long corridor. As I approached the door, I could hear voices inside, Marcus and Elena talking, though I couldn't make out the words. I pressed my ear to the door and tried to listen. Your father's behavior tonight was very strange, Elena was saying. I know. I think he's having some kind of stress reaction. He was talking nonsense about concerns with your background. What kind of concerns? I don't know. He was being vague and paranoid. I'm sorry, Elena. I never expected him to act like this. It's not your fault, darling. Sometimes people reveal their true nature under pressure. I heard footsteps moving around the room, and then Eleanor's voice again. Marcus, why don't you sit down and relax? I'll make you a drink to help you unwind after that unpleasant scene with your father. That sounds perfect. I could use something to help me forget this whole bizarre evening. My heart started pounding as I realized what might be happening. Elena was preparing a drink for Marcus, exactly the kind of scenario where she could introduce whatever substance she planned to use to kill him. I tried the door handle, but it was locked. I knocked urgently. "Marcus, Elena, I need to speak with you." The voices inside stopped. After a moment, Elena called out, "Mr. Chen, Marcus and I are retired for the evening. We'll speak with you tomorrow." "Marcus, open the door. It's an emergency." "Dad, go away," Marcus shouted back. "I told you I don't want to see you until you're ready to apologize." I could hear them moving around inside, and then Elena's voice, lower but still audible. "Don't worry about your father, darling. Here, drink this. It will help you sleep." "Elena, you're so good to me. I love you so much." I heard the sound of glass clinking, and I knew I was out of time. Marcus was about to drink whatever Elena had prepared for him, and once he did, he would probably never wake up. I stepped back and kicked the door as hard as I could. The wood splintered around the lock, but the door held. I kicked again, and this time the door burst open. Marcus and Elena were standing near the suite's bar area. Marcus had a glass in his hand, a glass filled with what looked like scotch, but which I was certain contained something far more dangerous. Eleanor was watching him with the same predatory smile I'd seen on the terrace. "Dad, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Marcus shouted. "Don't drink that," I yelled, lunging toward him, but I was too late. Marcus, startled by my sudden entrance and thinking I was having some kind of mental breakdown, defiantly raised the glass to his lips and drank its entire contents. "There," he said, setting down the empty glass. "Are you satisfied? It was just scotch, you paranoid lunatic." Elena was watching the scene with apparent concern, but I caught a glimpse of satisfaction in her eyes. She'd succeeded in getting Marcus to consume whatever substance she'd put in his drink, and now all she had to do was wait for it to take effect. "Marcus," I said urgently, "you need to make yourself vomit, right now. Go to the bathroom and stick your finger down your throat." "Dad, you've completely lost your mind. I'm calling hotel security to have you removed." But as Marcus reached for the phone, he suddenly stopped. His face went pale and he clutched his chest. "Elena," he gasped, "something's wrong. I can't breathe." Elena immediately went into her caring physician mode, rushing to Marcus's side and helping him to the sofa. "It's probably just stress from the confrontation with your father," she said soothingly. "Lie down and try to relax." But I could see that Marcus was experiencing much more than stress. His breathing was becoming labored, his skin was taking on a greyish pallor, and his pulse was visibly rapid. "Call 911, I shouted at Elena. "Of course," she replied, but she made no move toward the phone. Instead, she continued to comfort Marcus while he struggled with what were clearly the symptoms of poisoning. I realized that Eleanor had no intention of calling for medical help. She was going to let Marcus die while playing the role of the devoted wife who'd done everything she could to save him. I grabbed the phone myself and dialed 911. "This is Robert Chen at the Charleston Harbor Resort, Suite 2012. I need paramedics immediately. Someone has been poisoned." As I gave the dispatcher the details, I could hear Elena talking to Marcus in soothing tones. "It's going to be okay, darling. These symptoms will pass. Just try to relax and let your body process whatever is happening." She was coaching him to remain calm while the poison did its work, making no effort to induce vomiting or provide any actual medical intervention. "Elena, help him," I demanded. "You're a doctor." "I am helping him," she replied calmly. "The best thing for Marcus right now is to remain calm and avoid exerting himself." But Marcus was getting worse. His breathing was becoming increasingly shallow, and he was starting to lose consciousness. I couldn't wait for the paramedics. I grabbed Marcus under his arms and dragged him toward the bathroom. "What are you doing?" Elena demanded, finally dropping her caring facade. "I'm trying to save my son's life, which is more than you're doing." I got Marcus to the toilet and tried to induce vomiting, but he was too weak to cooperate. Elena appeared in the bathroom doorway, and for the first time I saw her true nature completely unmasked. "Mr. Chen, you need to stop interfering. Marcus is having a cardiac event brought on by stress. Nothing you do is going to change that. He's having a cardiac event because you poisoned him, you psychopath." Eleanor's expression became cold and calculating. "That's a very serious accusation, Mr. Chen. I hope you have evidence to support it." "I have all the evidence I need," I said, still trying to help Marcus breathe. "I know about James Patterson. I know about the doctor in Colombia. I know about all of them." For the first time, Eleanor looked genuinely surprised. "I don't know what you're talking about. Mrs. Patterson told me everything. She's been tracking you for 3 years. She knows you're a serial killer, and she has proof." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice was completely different, cold, clinical, utterly without emotion. "Well, Mr. Chen, that does complicate things. I had hoped to keep this simple, but you've made that impossible." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small syringe. "This contains enough potassium chloride to stop your heart in 30 seconds. It will look like you had a heart attack brought on by the stress of watching your son die." I realized that Elena was planning to kill both Marcus and me, making it appear that we'd both succumbed to cardiac events during a family argument. "You'll never get away with this," I said, trying to keep her talking while I looked for something to defend myself with. "Actually, I will. By tomorrow afternoon, I'll be in Costa Rica as the grieving widow whose husband and father-in-law both died tragically on her wedding night. The insurance money from Marcus's policy, combined with my inheritance from his estate, will be more than enough to fund a very comfortable new life." Eleanor raised the syringe, but before she could inject me, the suite's door burst open again. This time it was hotel security, responding to the emergency call I'd placed. "Charleston police! Nobody move!" Behind the security guards came Detective Torres and Mrs. Patterson, along with 2 paramedics who immediately rushed to Marcus. "Elena Rodriguez," Detective Torres announced, "you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Marcus Chen and conspiracy to commit murder in the death of James Patterson." Elena still had the syringe in her hand, and the paramedics' presence meant that Marcus's poisoning would be properly documented. For the first time in what had been the longest night of my life, I felt hope that my son might survive. As the paramedics worked to stabilize Marcus and the police handcuffed Elena, I realized that Mrs. Patterson's 3-year investigation had finally come to an end. Elena Rodriguez would face justice for her crimes, and Marcus would live to learn the truth about the woman he'd married. 6 months later, I sat in the witness stand of the Federal District Court in Charleston, looking directly at Elena Rodriguez as I testified about the events of Marcus's wedding night. She sat at the defense table in an orange prison jumpsuit, looking nothing like the radiant bride who had walked down the aisle of St. Catherine's Cathedral. The federal charges against Elena were extensive: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud related to the insurance policies, and racketeering charges that connected her activities across multiple states. The substance Elena had used was a concentrated digitalis derivative, the same type of cardiac medication that had killed James Patterson. But thanks to the quick response of the paramedics and the fact that we'd identified the poison early, Marcus had survived. The recovery had been long and difficult. Marcus spent 2 weeks in intensive care, his heart rhythm unstable as his body processed the toxins Elena had given him. The psychological recovery had been even harder. Marcus had awakened in the hospital to learn that his new wife was in jail, accused of trying to murder him. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Judge Margaret Williamson sentenced Elena to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 50 years for the attempted murder charges. Ms. Rodriguez, Judge Williamson said during sentencing, you have shown a complete disregard for human life and an alarming ability to manipulate and deceive others. Your actions have caused immeasurable pain to the families of your victims, and you have demonstrated no remorse for the lives you've destroyed. Elena showed no reaction to the sentence, maintaining the same cold, emotionless expression she'd worn throughout the trial. 6 months after the trial, Marcus had made remarkable progress in his recovery. He'd returned to full-time work at his law firm and was even dating again. Carefully, cautiously, but with the support of his family and a good therapist. "Dad," he said during one of our regular dinners together, "I want you to know how grateful I am that you trusted your instincts that night. If you hadn't investigated those text messages, if you hadn't been suspicious enough to follow up on Mrs. Patterson's warnings, I'd be dead." The experience had changed all of us profoundly. We'd learned that evil could wear a beautiful face, that predators could be charming and intelligent and seemingly perfect. We'd learned to value our instincts, to pay attention to small inconsistencies, and to never ignore warning signs just because we wanted to believe the best about someone. Most importantly, we'd learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is being willing to risk someone's anger in order to ensure their safety. When I broke down the door of that honeymoon suite, when I forced Marcus to confront the truth about Eleanor, I'd risked destroying my relationship with my son, but I'd also saved his life. Standing outside the federal courthouse after Eleanor's sentencing, surrounded by my family and Mrs. Patterson, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't expected. Justice had been served, Marcus was safe, and Elena Rodriguez would never hurt anyone again. The text message that had started this nightmare, "Step outside now," had seemed like a threat at the time. But it had actually been an opportunity to see the truth, to act on that truth, and to save someone I loved from a danger they couldn't see themselves. In the end, that's what family does. We step outside our comfort zones, we confront difficult truths, and we protect each other even when it's hard, even when it's frightening, even when we risk being wrong. Marcus's wedding day had been the worst and best day of my life. The day I almost lost my son, and the day I learned just how far I was willing to go to save him. The nightmare was over. Our family was safe. And Marcus Chen, my son, my pride and joy, was alive to build the life he deserved, surrounded by people who would always protect him from the Elena Rodriguezes of the world.